Apple has sued OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, for misappropriation of trade secrets in federal court in California. And why is that important for startups, and why is it a great reminder for startups? This is the video that's going to be talking about that particular topic. I'm Derek Fahey. I'm a registered patent attorney and intellectual property attorney with the Plus IP firm, and we're going to walk through the Apple versus AI lawsuit briefly and why is it so important and a great reminder for startups. So first off, recently you may have heard in the news that Apple has actually sued OpenAI for misappropriation of trade secrets. And some of the allegations in the complaint were that OpenAI hired executives of Apple and that they were actually boasting at some point, I believe, that they still had access to certain files and access. And additionally, the executive actually asked Apple employees to bring, items from Apple for a show and tell, so to speak, to discuss whatever they were going to discuss. And obviously those facts don't look really good for OpenAI, but only time will tell as for the lawsuits to see what happens. Certainly is not a good look for OpenAI, especially given the fact that they plan on IPOing here soon. But I think this is a really good reminder for startups. So in the lawsuit for Apple versus OpenAI, they are alleging counts of action for misappropriation of trade secrets. Trade secrets are a really interesting subset of intellectual property. Intellectual property covers patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. But trade secrets are very powerful. In fact, some of the biggest companies in the world operate, or their value is generated from trade secrets. The best example I could think of is Coca-Cola. The recipe for Coca-Cola is probably the world's best known trade secret. In fact, I don't think any single one person actually knows or could make Coca-Cola from scratch. It's siloed. Not everybody knows all the information. But trade secrets are really interesting because they have a value for as long as they're kept secret. And that's very different than patents. Patents, for utility patents, which protect the functional features of things, for example, software, utility patents only last for 20 years from the date the patent application is filed, or the patent application, the underlying patent application that's related to the issued patent is filed, 20 years. So if you're actually able to keep something a trade secret for a long period of time, it actually has a lot more value and can last a lot longer than a patent. Now, first off, with startups, I would say that patents and trade secrets are very complementary. So, for example, there are certain things that you're not going to be able to keep a secret. For example, if someone is going to have public access to something or can reverse engineer something, you're not going to be able to keep that secret. So patents do have a lot of value. But in other contexts, some things are not patentable. For example, a recipe, like a recipe for how to bake a cookie or the recipe for Coca-Cola, that's not going to be considered patentable. So you actually have to do your best to keep it trade secret. So I think it's a really great lesson for startups to think about, in addition to patents, to also consider trade secrets. Now, two most important things for trade secrets is you really need to, one, identify what the secret is. And that's going to be one of the challenges that Apple is going to have to do, is they're going to have to prove up that whatever the information they're seeking or trying to claim is a secret, what is it? What is the secret? That's the first thing. The second thing Apple is going to have to prove, in addition to other things, is not only what is the secret, but how was it kept secret. In the case of Coca-Cola spends a lot of time and money making really sure that no one person knows all of the information related to the formula, because that's a billion, if not trillion-dollar asset, that trade secret. So siloing information, making stuff impossible, or that making it very difficult for all the employees to have access to it. And a couple things for startups. One, if you're going to be keeping stuff secret, you got to actually keep it secret. What does that mean? You need to actually have procedures in place that keep it secret. What does that look like? That means confidentiality agreements, making it clear that this particular person is going to have access to highly confidential information, and make sure that that person knows that it should be kept secret. The second thing that companies should also be doing as it relates to trade secrets is they need to make sure, do certain things, and actually take the measures. So does a virtual assistant need to have access to highly confidential information? No. You need to make sure that how different folders and different things have restricted access. If it's a physical thing, only have people that need to have access to that physical thing. So you really have to take measures to keep it secret. The standard is very vague. It's what's considered reasonable within the industry. So, Coca-Cola's whatever is reasonable is obviously a lot different than a small startup, but you need to take measures to keep it secret. And the last thing I think is important is if you have employees leaving, I think it's really important to make it really clear before they leave with an exit interview or a letter or what have you, to make sure that they're understanding that the ramifications of them if they actually disclose or misappropriate trade secrets. Sometimes the employee may not understand that what they're doing is wrong. They may not even think anything about it. But quite frankly, it's a lot easier to make sure that those employees know when they leave that this will be an issue. Some people do it with letters, with gentle reminders of the confidentiality agreements that they have signed and the potential causes of action or what could happen to you if you actually were to disclose this trade secret. But that's just something to think about. So with that said, really curious to see what comes about with this Apple versus OpenAI lawsuit. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps my family and my team's family. And thanks so much for watching. And everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye now.